The moment it happened wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a confrontation in a hotel lobby or a lipstick stain on a collar. It wasn't the classic smell of unfamiliar perfume or a whisper caught on voicemail. It was a single buzz, a text notification, on a phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter. My husband's phone. Ethan's phone. The man I'd built a life with, shared dreams with, believed in with everything I had. He was upstairs, still in the shower. I'd just come home early from a Friday client meeting, carrying his favorite sushi from the place downtown, the one that only did omakase and made him feel fancy. I was still in my blazer when I noticed his phone light up. I almost didn't look. Almost. But some force, maybe intuition, maybe survival, tilted my eyes toward the screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. Still sore, counting down till Monday. Yours. Jay. My body froze. Not just the fingers or the breath. My entire bloodstream, my bones, my name. Time didn't stop. It splintered. The life I thought I was living cracked in half in the space of 3 seconds. Jay. Jenna. Design department. 29. The one with the tattoo of a phoenix on her wrist. The one Ethan once said was too intense for his team. The same Jenna who'd sent him an inside joke meme last Christmas. The same Jenna I'd said hello to at the company gala, completely unaware she was fantasizing about my husband's hands on her skin. That text didn't just shatter my heart. It undid the last 10 years of my life. Every choice, every sacrifice, every smile I thought was real. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I placed it gently back where it was. I stood there in our spotless kitchen, looking around like I was in someone else's house. Our photos, our framed trip to the Amalfi Coast, our houseplants, our copper pots hanging in a curated Instagram-worthy row. Everything that was supposed to say happy marriage. But what does a happy marriage look like when one of you is living a double life? I remember walking into our bedroom, hearing the water still running. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the steam curl out from under the bathroom door. A normal moment for any couple, but I was no longer anyone's wife. Not really. I was a prop in his illusion. And maybe I had been for a long time. There's a kind of grief that doesn't make a sound. It's the kind that eats you from the inside out, while you keep smiling at the world. That night, I left the sushi on the counter, wrote a sticky note that said, "Called back to the office, eat," without me, and walked out the door. I drove nowhere in particular. My hands were shaking so badly I almost hit the curb. I ended up at Green Lake, staring out at the still water like it had answers. How do you unlove someone who made you believe he was your forever? We were supposed to try for kids next year. We were supposed to move to Portland for his promotion. I had put off a creative project I'd dreamed of since college because he said it wasn't the right time. I was waiting for the right time, the right moment, the next milestone, always one step closer to a future that no longer existed. The betrayal wasn't just about sex. It wasn't about another woman. It was about the person I became for him and how he threw that version of me away without a second thought. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Ethan after he got out of the shower, pretending to be tired. I watched him breathe, watched him turn toward me in his sleep like nothing had changed, like he wasn't touching 2 lives with the same hands. In that moment, I realized the worst part of being betrayed is realizing the person who hurt you sleeps peacefully while you drown in questions. Was it the first time? How long had it been? Did he ever really love me? What else hadn't I seen? And that's what truly haunted me. What else hadn't I seen? I spent the next few days playing the good wife, smiling, cooking, asking about his deadlines, kissing him goodbye in the morning. Inside, I was drowning in rage so cold it felt like clarity. I started noticing everything. His phone, always flipped face down. The shower lasting a little longer. the new cologne, the gym membership that started without warning. And suddenly, the pattern became obvious. The truth wasn't hiding. I'd just stopped looking for it. But now, I was looking. Hard. I opened my laptop, created a private folder labeled Seattle Art Residency, a name I knew he'd never question. Inside it, I started documenting everything. Screenshots, financial records, calendar overlaps. I remembered dates he'd claimed to be in meetings and checked his photos, receipts, social media activity. What I found didn't just confirm the affair. It proved it had been going on for over a year. A year of pretending. A year of lies. A year of sleeping beside a stranger. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw plates. But more than that, I wanted something different. I didn't want revenge in the way movies show it. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted him exposed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw plates. But more than that, I wanted something different. I didn't want revenge in the way movies show it. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted him exposed. Because it wasn't just about what he did to me. It was what he took from me. My sense of truth. My trust in my own instincts. My ability to look in the mirror and say, I am not a fool. So I stopped being passive. I started being strategic. The turning point came one morning over coffee. Ethan was scrolling his phone. I asked casually about his mother's upcoming birthday barbecue in Napa Valley. Vivian's milestone 70th, always a grand affair. He nodded, told me she expected us there, and said, she'd love if you brought your berry tart again. You know how much she talks about it. My smile was razor sharp when I replied, of course. I'll bring something special. And in that moment, the idea clicked. I didn't know what the ending would look like yet, but I knew where it would begin, that barbecue, that carefully curated social event, surrounded by friends and family and colleagues and charm. What better place to end a lie than in front of everyone who helped build it? I made my first move that night. I wasn't going to play the victim anymore. I was going to reclaim the story, not in whispers, not behind closed doors, but out loud, and in the light, because secrets die in the sunlight. And Ethan's carefully constructed life, it was about to burn. If this story has you hooked already, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. We're just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Camille turns the tables. Mini quiz. Let's hear from you. What would you do if you discovered a text like that on your partner's phone? A. Confront them. Immediately. B. Gather evidence first, then plan your next move. Type your answer A or B in the comments, and tell us why. We're reading, everyone. There's a terrifying silence in clarity. It doesn't come like a tidal wave or a slap across the face. It arrives quietly, on the edges of your vision, in the half-second pause when you hear your partner lie and realize you no longer need to pretend you believe it. That's where I was. Camille Harper, 36, the woman who once rearranged her entire life for the man she loved, now sitting at her desk with a cup of untouched coffee, watching the final strands of her marriage unravel in front of her. After that first text, everything became a breadcrumb. I had already begun documenting things, but it wasn't enough to simply collect screenshots and track Jenna's Instagram likes. I needed a full picture. I needed proof that wouldn't just validate my pain, but establish my truth. Irrefutable. Complete. Undeniable. Ethan's behavior had shifted over the last year, but I'd ignored the subtle patterns. Now, they were glaring. The night gym sessions, the random trips to Portland, his regional training weekends, his obsession with deleting browser history, and the way he clutched his phone like a lifeline, always angled away from me. What once looked like stress from work, now read as guilt. And when someone is hiding something, guilt has a pattern. overcompensation, sweetness, unexpected gifts, a sudden interest in helping with laundry or dinner. All designed to keep the illusion alive. I decided to build my own case. I didn't want confrontation without facts. I wanted precision, strategy. I wanted a map of his betrayal. First, I mirrored his phone activity. I knew Ethan's backup passwords. I wasn't proud of knowing them, but marriage builds a certain familiarity. One night, as he slept, mouth slightly open, phone unlocked in his hand, I synced it to a cloud account I controlled. From then on, every message, every photo, every call log passed through my quiet digital filter. Jenna, the woman in the text. She was more than a fling. She was a second relationship, and it wasn't just lust. The tone of their messages was casual but layered with emotional intimacy. They had nicknames, inside jokes. She called him E and said she missed their corner booth. One message struck me like a blade. Felt more like home last night than my actual apartment. He responded, "You are home." That's when something shifted in me. The heartbreak twisted, turned cold. Not numb, not angry, just efficient. I could feel myself moving into a version of me I'd never met before. One that didn't cry over lost time. One that didn't spiral into what-ifs. I didn't want his remorse. I wanted truth, the whole of it. And I wanted my life back. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Over the course of a weekend, I cataloged his travel receipts. I compared them to company calendar entries and GPS history. Yes, I had location tracking turned on since our road trip days. On the second night of that weekend, I discovered Ethan had never gone to the leadership summit in Vancouver. He'd gone to Lake Tahoe. Not with colleagues, but with Jenna. The hotel booking was under his name, but the room was for two. There were spa appointments, wine tasting reservations, and a jewelry purchase that never ended up in our home. I sat in bed in complete silence, staring at the screen while Ethan slept peacefully beside me. I remembered the week he left for that summit. I'd sent him with handwritten notes in his suitcase, little words of encouragement I thought would boost him in those high-stress meetings. He probably read them between kisses with someone else. The realization wasn't just that I'd been betrayed. It was that I'd become invisible. For months I'd felt it. His increasing absence, not physically but emotionally. He was there, but not present. Attentive, but only on the surface, like he was acting out the role of a husband with just enough skill to avoid suspicion. But real intimacy? That had vanished a long time ago. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, searching for signs. Was it my appearance? Had I changed too much? Had I been too focused on work? Had I stopped being desirable? But as soon as those thoughts formed, I stopped them. That's what betrayal does. It redirects blame onto the victim. No, I had loved honestly. I had compromised, supported, encouraged. I had given my full self. And I would not allow his deception to become my fault. I started running again, not for health but for clarity. Every morning before sunrise, I jogged through the cold Seattle mist, letting my body burn through the weight of my heartbreak. Each step was a reminder. I'm still here. I'm still moving. I still get to choose what comes next. A week after the Tahoe discovery, I scheduled an appointment with someone named Margot Alvarez, a digital forensics consultant with a background in cybersecurity. She worked with lawyers and corporations, and she was exactly who I needed. I met her at a quiet cafe on Capitol Hill. She wore a gray hoodie and spoke with a directness that calmed me. "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I want a map. I want the full layout of their affair, and I want to know what else he's hiding." Margot nodded like she'd heard this 100 times. "You're looking for the exit strategy. I can help with that." She asked me to bring whatever I had. Emails, logins, screenshots. In 48 hours, she gave me what I hadn't even thought to look for. An entire file directory Ethan had hidden on his cloud drive labeled Client Archive 2022. It wasn't client files. It was Jenna. Photos, trip itineraries, restaurant bookings, messages backed up from old apps. She also found financial statements tied to a secondary bank account, one I hadn't known existed. It had nearly $18,000 in transactions over the past 9 months. Most of it matched dates he'd claimed to be traveling for work. I remember walking back to my car that day with the manila folder pressed against my chest like a shield. The air was heavy, the sky gray. I had enough proof now to not only end my marriage, but to end the fiction. But fiction resists death, especially when it's curated for public consumption. Ethan wasn't just my husband. He was his mother's golden son, his co-worker's go-to guy, the charming man who knew which wine to pair with which cheese. He was a performance, and I had been the supporting cast. No more. That evening, I went home and cleaned the house like I was preparing for war. Not messily, deliberately. I removed sentimental objects from sight. The Venice photograph, the Love You Most pillow, our anniversary candle. I packed them in a bin and labeled it Untrue Things. Then I opened a notebook, drew a line down the center and titled one side Him. The other side read Me. I started listing what I'd given, what I'd lost, what I still had. It felt strange, juvenile almost. But then something miraculous happened. I realized how much of me still remained, even after everything. Still had my mind, my integrity, my community, my freedom. What he'd taken from me, trust, time, security, I could rebuild. And now I had a decision to make. Not whether to leave. That part was clear. But how? How would I reclaim the narrative? Quietly? Legally? Publicly? The answer began to form not from my rage, but from something deeper, a kind of sacred justice. I didn't want to destroy him in secret. I wanted him to stand in the light of what he'd done, not just to me, but to the people who believed in him. The universe delivered the opening act. One morning, over eggs and black coffee, Ethan brought up his mother's 70th birthday celebration again. It's going to be in Napa, he said. Full vineyard setup, catered lunch, everyone'll be there. I stirred my coffee slowly. Sounds beautiful. She asked if you'd do your tart again, the blackberry one with almond crust. I smiled. I'll bring something better. He didn't notice the weight behind the words. He just kissed my forehead and left for work, humming as he walked out the door. I stood in the silence, listening to the echo of a man I no longer knew. And that was the moment I decided. I wouldn't just leave. I would tell the truth, out loud, in Napa. With every name and every detail, I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning liberation. And I had just begun. When the moment of decision arrives, not just the thought of leaving, not the first hint of justice, but the exact second your pain transforms into precision, it doesn't scream. It settles in your chest like still water, unshaken by noise, unmoved by fear. That's what I felt the morning I circled Vivian's birthday barbecue on the calendar with a red Sharpie. It would take place in Napa Valley, a sprawling vineyard estate owned by a family friend, filled with chandeliers strung through olive trees and soft jazz melting into summer air. Ethan had described it with a casualness that didn't match the magnitude of the event. It was their family's equivalent of the Met Gala. That's when I knew. I wouldn't leave quietly. I wouldn't pack a suitcase in the night and vanish, like an ashamed shadow. I had spent 10 years helping him build his pristine image. I had smiled through holidays, through difficult dinners with his passive-aggressive sister, through conversations with Vivian, where every compliment came wrapped in subtle comparison. I had belonged to their version of the story. This time, I'd rewrite it. The plan came together not in a rush, but in layers, each day peeling away another excuse, another inhibition. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my best friend, not even my therapist. This wasn't a story that required sympathy. It required silence. For now, I started with the guest list. Vivian and I had a cordial relationship, polished, tolerant. We had never been close. She was always more in love with Ethan's past than his present, still clinging to pictures of his high school girlfriend. Clara, the blonde cheerleader turned pediatric surgeon. I was never a threat, just a placeholder she tolerated. So when I called her, voice warm and friendly, and asked if I could bring a friend to the birthday barbecue, she didn't hesitate. She's a bit of a mess right now, I said, inserting gentle pity into my tone. She works with Ethan in the design department, just moved to the city. I thought being surrounded by people, by family, might help. Oh, darling, Vivian replied with that slow, drawling empathy she saved for acts of performative kindness. How generous of you, of course. I smiled at the mirror as I hung up. Jenna, I whispered, you're invited. That afternoon, I created a new email account. Not under my name, of course. Something soft, ambiguous. I used it to find Jenna's professional contact information through Ethan's corporate directory. The email I sent was warm, open-hearted. Hey, Jenna, I've heard a lot about you from Ethan. Your creativity, your sense of humor. He thinks the world of you. I wanted to personally reach out because we're hosting a gathering for his mother's birthday and thought you might enjoy it. It's going to be very relaxed. Wine, music, good food. Ethan mentioned you've been feeling a little isolated in a new city. I know how that feels. I'd love for you to join us. Best, Camille. She replied within 3 hours. Camille, wow. This is incredibly sweet of you. I'm kind of blown away, to be honest. Yes, it's been a little tough adjusting. I'd love to come if you're sure his family won't mind. Warmly, Jenna, I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the moment. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but to ground myself in what I was doing. I wasn't inviting her into a trap. I was inviting her into the truth. And the truth, as I'd learned, had a way of transforming people, either by breaking them or revealing them. I didn't know yet what it would do to her, but I knew what it would do for me. The days that followed were methodical. I doubled down on playing the role of supportive wife. I cooked Ethan's favorite dinners, laughed at his tired jokes, made soft suggestions about vacation plans, like our postponed anniversary trip to Jackson Hole, the one we'd shelved last spring. He responded with vague promises, always scrolling through his phone, always a little elsewhere. I began to wonder whether he believed his own performance. Had he convinced himself this was normal, that his two lives could coexist without consequence? Meanwhile, I had moved money from our joint checking account into a new account in my name. Not recklessly. Not in a way that would alert suspicion, just enough to create space. I copied every document Margot had uncovered for me, photos, emails, bank statements, into a flash drive that I locked in a safe deposit box. I also sent encrypted backups to 2 trusted contacts who didn't know what they were storing, only that it mattered. One of them was my college roommate who now worked at a law firm in Oregon. The other was an old professor who owed me a favor. Neither asked questions. I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney on the east side of town, someone Margot had recommended. Her name was Christine Vu, and she had the demeanor of a courtroom surgeon. Calm, exacting, with a reputation for precision. I brought her everything. My notes, the evidence, the prenup. She read in silence, occasionally underlining a phrase or tapping her pen against the desk. At first glance, she said finally, you have grounds not just for divorce with cause, but also for challenging the prenup terms. The infidelity, combined with financial misconduct, can create a compelling case for asset reevaluation. I nodded. Do you want this to be public? I want it to be undeniable, I replied. She met my gaze. Then you're going to have to hold steady through the storm, because this won't be clean. It was never clean, I said. I just didn't see the dirt. Before I left her office, I signed a preliminary engagement letter and left with a folder of next steps. I knew I was crossing a line now, from suspicion to action, from devastation to declaration. The Camille who walked into Christine's office that day was not the woman who had discovered that text message 2 weeks earlier. That Camille was broken. This one was awake. The night before the barbecue, I packed a small overnight bag and hid it beneath the spare tire in my trunk. I didn't plan on staying. I'd already arranged for my sister to come by the house in 3 days and collect the rest of my things. Ethan didn't notice the shift. He was too distracted. His anxiety, once subtle, now bristled under the surface. He couldn't name it yet, but something in his world was trembling. As we lay in bed, he touched my shoulder. You okay? He asked. You've been quiet. I'm fine, I said, brushing his hand lightly. Just thinking about tomorrow. Vivian's going to be ridiculous, he muttered, rolling onto his back. I think she's flying in that chef from the magazine. I turned off the lamp and stared at the ceiling. It's going to be unforgettable, I said, and I meant every word. The morning of Vivian's birthday barbecue arrived, wrapped in a kind of golden California light that made everything feel softer than it was. The vineyards stretched in long, orderly lines beneath the blue sky, and white tents were already erected on the lawn of the estate by the time Ethan and I pulled into the gravel driveway. It was picturesque, timeless, the kind of setting where secrets have no place, or at least where people pretend they don't. Ethan had been jittery all morning. He didn't say so outright, he wouldn't dare, but his body betrayed him. He paced while brushing his teeth. He double-checked the gift bag. He asked if I'd packed the tart, even though I hadn't mentioned bringing one. The silence between us was thick with things unsaid, and every time I caught him glancing at his phone, I imagined Jenna's name lighting up on the screen. I'd told him the day before that I'd invited her. I said we ran into each other near his office, and that I thought it would be nice for her to join, that Vivian had approved. His face had gone pale, his composure cracking for a flicker of a second before he recovered, nodding too quickly, too tightly. Oh, right, yeah, she's nice, he said. Nice, I offered a bright smile, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes. He hadn't spoken much since. Jenna and I had arranged to meet outside her hotel. She was staying at a boutique place downtown, all glass and eucalyptus-scented hallways. She stepped out right on time, dressed in a soft floral dress and wedge heels, her hair curled just enough to look effortless. She looked nervous, excited, like someone stepping into a new world, unaware that the world she thought she was entering didn't exist. She waved as she approached the car, and I opened the back door for her like the gracious host I'd pretended to be. She leaned in and saw Ethan sitting rigidly in the front seat. "Hey, you," she said, smiling with a mix of familiarity and flirtation. Ethan turned around, his eyes wide, his jaw slightly clenched. "Hi," he muttered, the word almost swallowed. "He gets migraines sometimes," I said smoothly. "Stress-related, but he wouldn't miss today for anything." Jenna looked uncertain for a moment, then nodded, settling in. I started the car and pulled away from the curb. The drive was 20 minutes of exquisite discomfort. I filled the silence with harmless chatter, questions about her favorite restaurants, her thoughts on the city, anecdotes from Ethan's college years that were mostly invented, but full of humiliating details. Each story was a tiny needle. Ethan remained silent, staring out the window, his fingers digging into his thighs. Jenna laughed politely, unaware that every word she spoke was being cataloged by someone who knew too much. When we arrived, the vineyard estate was already alive with people. Music drifted from hidden speakers, and waiters in black vests carried trays of champagne and cucumber water. The whole event felt plucked from a magazine. Rustic wood tables, wildflower centerpieces, a white piano set beneath an oak tree. I stepped out of the car and took Jenna by the arm. "Come on," I said. "I'll introduce you to everyone." Ethan followed behind us, slow and uncertain. The first person we met was Vivian herself. She was in her signature cream and pearls, martini in hand, the picture of upper-class elegance. Her face lit up when she saw us. "You must be Jenna," she exclaimed, reaching out both hands. Jenna beamed. "Yes, thank you so much for having me." "Any friend of Ethan's is family," Vivian said, turning to me. "Camille, you always know how to make people feel welcome." I smiled. "Just doing what I can." Ethan tried to interject. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second? Privately?" Vivian waved him off. "Later, darling. I want to get to know Jenna first. Go mingle." And mingle we did. I stayed close to Jenna, introducing her to uncles, cousins, Vivian's book, club friends. Every introduction made Ethan more frantic. I caught him watching us, texting furiously, ducking into side conversations with people he normally would have ignored. But I stayed calm. I was water, smooth, steady, inevitable. Dinner was served just before sunset, long tables under glowing lights. Guests settled into their seats, glasses clinking, laughter rolling across the yard. I had called Vivian that morning to confirm the seating arrangement. Ethan and I at the head of the main table, Jenna directly across from him, Vivian to Jenna's right. A perfect line of sight. As the main course was placed, grilled salmon, summer vegetables, lemon risotto, Vivian stood and tapped her glass. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she said, her voice loud and melodic. 70 is not an age I thought I'd celebrate with such grace. But here we are, surrounded by family, friends, laughter, and my beautiful children. "Ethan," she reached over and touched his shoulder. "You've always been the anchor of this family." Ethan nodded stiffly. I could see the sweat forming on his upper lip. "And Camille," she continued, "you are the light. Your loyalty, your kindness, your generosity, it means everything to us." I rose slowly, lifting my wine glass. "Thank you, Vivian. That means more than you know." I turned to the table, my voice calm, clear. "If I may, I'd like to say something." The hum of conversation quieted. All eyes turned to me. "Family," I began, "is built on a foundation of truth. At least, that's what I always believed. But lately, I've come to understand that truth can be inconvenient for people who thrive in illusion." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. Jenna looked curious. Fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I learned something recently," I said. "Something about love and trust and betrayal." I looked directly at Ethan. "Did you want to say anything before I continue?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. He didn't speak. I thought not. I turned back to the guests. "This isn't easy to say, but I believe it must be said. Because I've spent too long protecting someone who never once protected me. And I'm done." Jenna's expression had changed. Her smile faded, her brow furrowed. "I discovered," I said, "that my husband, Ethan, has been having an affair with someone he works with. For nearly a year and a half." Gasps echoed around the table. "Jenna," I said softly, "you may not have known, I don't blame you if you didn't. But you deserve to know that he never told me we were separated. He never told me we were divorcing, because we weren't. Jenna's fork slipped from her hand. But there's more, I continued. This wasn't just a matter of infidelity. It was deception on every level. Personal, emotional, financial. I reached into my bag and removed a folder. Inside this envelope is a record of unauthorized transfers Ethan made from our joint account to a private account he didn't disclose. Records of company funds being used for personal expenses, including the trip to Lake Tahoe, which he claimed was for work. I handed the folder to Vivian. Her hands trembled as she opened it. This includes purchases for gifts, hotels, meals, all hidden, all deliberate. Ethan lunged for the folder, but Vivian stood, holding it to her chest. Is this true? She asked him, her voice barely audible. Ethan didn't answer. Camille, Vivian said slowly, you're sure about this? I have digital evidence, testimony from a financial investigator, and backup records sent to a law firm in Oregon. I didn't come here lightly. I turned to the rest of the table. This family deserves to know who they're protecting, who they're applauding, and I deserve to stop pretending. I picked up my glass again. To truth, I said, and drank. Then I placed my napkin on the table and stood. I won't be staying for dessert, I said, my voice soft now. Vivian, thank you for the invitation. The barbecue is lovely, but I have nothing left to serve here. I turned to Ethan, whose face was ghostly, hollow. My attorney will be in touch. And with that, I walked away from the table, down the gravel path, toward the car parked beneath a fig tree. I didn't look back. There's a kind of silence that follows destruction. Not the suffocating silence of tension, not the icy stillness of betrayal, but the open, expansive quiet that comes after the fire burns everything down. The quiet that feels like space, like air, like possibility. I felt that silence for the first time a week after Vivian's barbecue, sitting in a near-empty apartment, my name signed to a fresh lease, watching light pour across the bare hardwood floors. My life had no furniture, no framed photos, no familiar echoes, but it belonged to me again. Ethan hadn't reached out, not directly. There were attempts, voicemails, text messages, emails written in legalese and apology, but I ignored them. My attorney, Christine Vu, handled everything. She told me within days of the party that the evidence I had collected was overwhelming. That, combined with his financial misconduct, would nullify large portions of the prenuptial agreement. Turns out when men like Ethan get caught, they don't become vengeful. They become small, manageable, desperate. Within 2 months, the divorce was finalized. He signed the documents with barely a whimper. Maybe he was trying to protect what was left of his image. Or maybe, for the first time, he understood the weight of what he had lost. Jenna didn't attend the hearings. From what I was told, she was fired from her position at the firm after an internal ethics review. There was no formal charge against her. She wasn't involved in the financial tampering. But her proximity to it was enough. She moved out of Seattle a few weeks later. Someone said she went back to her hometown in Vermont. I didn't dig further. I had no interest in watching her try to rebuild what she helped break. Whatever lessons life had in store for her, they weren't mine to oversee. Vivian sent me a letter. 10 pages, handwritten in immaculate cursive on linen paper. It arrived in a cream envelope that smelled faintly of rosewater. She wrote of heartbreak, disappointment, and the cruel discovery of who her son had become. She didn't ask me to forgive him. She didn't even try to defend him. She asked for something else entirely. If we could meet for coffee, just once. To speak as women, not as in-laws. I accepted. We met at a small cafe near Capitol Hill. She wore sunglasses despite the cloudy day, and her hands trembled as she stirred her tea. She apologized, not for raising him, but for not seeing what I'd been living with. She said she'd clung to a version of Ethan that hadn't existed in years. I told her I understood, because I had done the same. Our conversation was awkward, halting, but real. We met again 2 months later, and though we were no longer family, there was something respectful in our connection. 2 women finally facing the truth without illusion. Surprisingly, it was Ethan's sister, Lauren, who reached out first. We'd never been close. She'd always treated me with the polite distance of someone unsure if I'd last. But after the barbecue, she called me, said she always suspected something wasn't right with Ethan, that he was too slippery, too good at charming his way out of accountability. We met for drinks at a rooftop bar a few weeks later. She told me stories about their childhood I'd never heard. She cried a little. I didn't. I just listened. It was strange how someone who had once treated me like a stranger now felt like a kind of ally. I suppose pain, when shared honestly, can create unlikely bridges. The financial damage Ethan caused wasn't irreversible, but it was close. Thanks to Christine's guidance and the documentation I'd preserved, I was able to recover most of what had been siphoned from our joint account. Enough to put a down payment on a small 1-bedroom bungalow in Santa Barbara. Nothing extravagant, but it had high ceilings, sunlight, and no memories clinging to the corners. I painted each wall myself. Burnt sienna in the kitchen, sage green in the bedroom, soft ivory in the living room. Colors Ethan would have hated. That thought made me smile. I found myself doing things I hadn't done in years, taking long morning walks with no destination, listening to jazz in the bath, eating alone at cafes with a book propped open. At first it felt strange, the absence of companionship, but slowly, that absence transformed into something else, peace. I wasn't lonely, I was alone. There's a difference. One is emptiness, the other is space. People asked me if I regretted the public nature of how I ended it, if I felt guilty about turning a family celebration into a moment of reckoning. I always answered honestly, no, because the barbecue wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to carry his secrets any longer. Secrecy had been his weapon. He had relied on my silence, on my loyalty. He had counted on my dignity to protect him. And for years, I had played that role without realizing the cost. But truth changes things. Truth, once spoken aloud, shatters the illusion. Not just for others, but for yourself. The moment I said those words, Ethan has been having an affair, I felt something rise in me that had been buried under years of performance. Not rage, not pride, something older, a kind of reclamation. I no longer needed to convince anyone I was a good wife. I had been. And that was enough. I started writing again. Short stories at first, then essays. Then one night, sitting at the little desk by my window, I began to write about the barbecue, about the marriage, about the moment I chose myself. I didn't write it with bitterness. I wrote it with precision, with tenderness, with clarity. I submitted it anonymously to a digital magazine that focused on women's stories of transformation. They published it under the title, "The Day I Invited My Husband's Mistress to Dinner." It went viral within a week. Thousands of women reached out, some with their own stories, others just to say thank you. There's a power in being seen. One afternoon in December, I received a job offer from a nonprofit in Denver, a creative director position, more aligned with the kind of work I used to dream about in my 20s before marriage made me practical. The pay was fair, the team was small, and the office was nestled near the foothills of the Rockies. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. The mountains were calling. Ethan had always preferred beaches. I moved to Denver that January. Snow dusted the sidewalks and the air smelled clean in a way that felt holy. Nobody here knew my story, unless I chose to tell it. There was no one looking at me with pity or whispered curiosity. I was just Camille. A woman starting again. Not over. Again. There's a difference. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Ethan for 3 days. Not once. Not even in passing. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like breath. That's healing. Not loud, not dramatic. Just ordinary moments reclaimed. Vivian called me last week. Ethan's sentencing is approaching. He took a plea deal in exchange for cooperation with a broader corporate fraud investigation. She wanted to know if I'd write a character letter to the judge on his behalf. I paused before answering. Then, with the same steady voice I'd used at the barbecue, I said, "I'm not the person to ask. Some debts can't be paid with borrowed compassion." I hung up gently, not out of anger, but out of finality. The thing people misunderstand about betrayal is that they think forgiveness is a favor you grant the person who wronged you, but it's not. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. It's not pretending it didn't happen. It's choosing not to carry it forever. I'm not fully there yet. Some nights, the past still lingers like a ghost at the edge of the bed, but it no longer owns me. I drive now with the windows down. I laugh too loud sometimes. I sing in the shower again. I stand in grocery aisles reading labels like I have time to spare, and I do. Because the most beautiful part of starting over is realizing you're no longer waiting for someone to make life feel meaningful. You get to do that for yourself. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I don't agree. Because this story, my story, was never about revenge. It was about truth. Truth served raw, unflinching, and necessary. Truth that cut through the fantasy and left only what was real. And what's real is this. I survived. I healed. I told the truth. And in doing so, I became free. The rest? That's just scenery. Camille Harper's journey began with a message. A few careless words from a phone left on a countertop that shattered the life she thought she'd built on love, trust, and shared dreams. From that moment, a quiet unraveling began. Not the kind marked by screaming matches or slammed doors, but by cold clarity, sleepless nights, and the slow, methodical uncovering of a double life. Her story was never just about a cheating husband. It was about the lies we swallow in the name of keeping peace, the gaslighting we normalize because we're too afraid of what the truth might cost, and the emotional labor women are expected to carry without ever appearing tired. Over the course of her 5-part journey, Camille transformed from a woman stunned into silence to one who wielded truth with grace and power. She didn't confront Ethan in rage. She didn't storm out. She stayed, watched, documented, and prepared. Every move she made was deliberate, because she understood something crucial. The power was no longer in emotion. It was in clarity, in control, and in reclaiming the narrative. She invited his mistress to a family barbecue, not to embarrass, but to expose, not to hurt, but to illuminate. Camille's decision to reveal everything at the most public, carefully, curated event in their social calendar was not an act of cruelty, but of liberation. Because nothing flourishes in the dark like betrayal. Her story is a masterclass in silent strength. It's what happens when a woman decides not to break, but to bend with intention, and then stand back up straighter than before. In the aftermath, Camille didn't just survive. She rebuilt. From the ashes of a fraudulent marriage, she constructed a new life on her own terms, a home filled with her colors, her memories, and her choices. She rediscovered her voice, her art, and her self-worth. She moved not just to a new city, but into a new version of herself. And in that space, She learned that forgiveness isn't about pretending the betrayal didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it define your future. So what's the lesson in Camille's story? And how can we apply it to our own lives? It's this. Truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie. Often, we hold on to relationships, jobs, friendships, or versions of ourselves that no longer serve us because the truth feels too hard to face. But denial comes at a cost. It erodes our self-trust, our joy, and our identity. Camille teaches us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking for clarity from the person who's confusing you and start giving it to yourself. You do not need anyone's permission to protect your peace. You do not need their confession to validate your suspicion. Your intuition is not irrational. It's sacred. Listen to it. She also reminds us that exposure is not always loud. Strength isn't always shouting. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is walk away from the person who betrayed you, not in bitterness, but in silence, in wholeness, in power, in our own lives. We can take this story and reflect on the spaces where we are still shrinking to fit someone else's version of who we're supposed to be. We can ask ourselves, what truth am I afraid to admit? What lie am I still protecting? Whether you've been betrayed, manipulated, ignored, or doubted, know that you are not broken. You are being reshaped. Camille's story is not unique because of the scandal. It's powerful because of the choice she made to stop hiding, to reclaim her dignity, and to rebuild. And if she can, so can you. Now let's hear from you. Here's a small reflection quiz. If you were in Camille's position, what would you do? A. Walk away quietly, no confrontation, just leave. B. Gather evidence, confront, and take back control on your terms. Comment A or B below and let us know why you chose that option. What's your perspective on Camille's decision? Do you think she went too far, or was her response perfectly measured? Drop your thoughts in the comments so others can read and join the conversation. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or just made you think a little differently, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue, creating stories that go beyond betrayal and speak to resilience, power, and truth. We'll see you in the next one.